Hello and welcome to another episode of Healing with Mel. So, I haven't spoken in a while on this podcast. I needed a break, some space to figure out what it was that I wanted out of my life for this next chapter. And it's definitely been a journey, to say the least. I've discovered some new things, and today I wanted to share those things. I think this is going to be a multiple part series because there's a lot of information here, and I'm learning, and I want to share as I go because I truly find that this type of information has been a little bit gatekeeped over the years through multiple things. First thing being the patriarchy and our society removing and erasing this type of stuff from our history. And secondly, I've noticed that a lot of people who teach this kind of stuff tend to charge for it right out of the gate, and that's not cool because some people just truly need to be able to access it without having to pay and have that reawakening inside of their soul on their own without having to pay for it. Now, I have the means to afford to pay for a course right now, which is so amazing. And I'm feeling called to share some of this information with you all at no cost, simply so that I can start sharing this information because it's important and it needs to be shared. And that information is under the topic of sacred femininity. It's a topic that is kind of like brushed under the rug by a lot of people because it's like feminism. Why is that a thing? Like, why is it so important? It's important simply because for centuries, women were the matriarchs and the center of communities. They were the healers, they were the guides, they were the teachers. And through many wars and you name it, we were erased. And one of the many things that they did to erase us was burn us at the stake. So I'm sure you've all heard of the witch burnings back in ye old times. And yeah, so I just wanted to share a little bit about that history specifically, and then in later episodes we can get more into some details surrounding why it's so important to bring this back into the light. So I'm going to chat to you specifically about how the modern day Christianity that we know is absolute bullshit. And it was actually based upon the early beliefs that were actually created around the sacred feminine. And it's just been twisted and misconstrued over the years due to men changing sacred texts and books, including the Bible. Now, as an ex-Christian, as a cult survivor, learning all of this was a lot for my brain because I was conditioned for so long to believe that it was set in stone. This was the way it was, and there was not really any facts backing it up. It was just, it's the Bible. We have to believe it because it's the Bible. I don't know about you, but no thanks. No thanks. So when I come upon stories that ring true in my heart, like this one, I must share. So, let's start at the beginning. So in caveman and early times, people were egalitarians, which means the female or the mother was like a fertile goddess, and they were at the center of their lives, and they were equal to men. And the need and want of resources actually created that patriarchal mentality in society, but the female focus was still at the center, which is important to note, because even though they realized that like things could go a certain way, they tended to continue to stay with that loving, heart-centered center being the woman of the society. And then we look at things just like in Malta, the very first temple that they have found in historically to date that they have been able to find was found in Malta, and it was in the shape of a woman. As in, the temple itself was built in the shape of a woman lying down on the ground, okay? And at solstice, the sun would shine right through her vagina and light her up all the way to the crown of her head. Wow, right? And that just goes to show that like these temples were the center of the communities, and women were worshipped and thanked because we literally create life in our womb. Like, hello. Okay. And then we move more towards okay. So here, there were central hearths at the temples about wild, sexy, fertile goddesses. And people would use that fire to actually light the fires inside of their homes. So not only was it the center of their community, it was also their source of magic, essentially, and they considered fire to be magic. It truly is. It really is. If you disagree with that, come on. Fire is just beautiful, and it has so much magic behind it. And people would literally go to the center of this temple, light a torch from the center, thank the goddesses and the priestesses and the women for their guidance and their magic, and then go light their homes and bring that magic into their home. That's so beautiful. Okay. And then male deities became more at a center, and rabbis began pushing the women out of the temples. And this created a lot of unrest all over the area in the Middle East. So that was the beginning of like the erasure. Okay. So now I'm going to get a little bit into the story of what we know as like the birth of Jesus. Okay. And how what we learned in modern Christianity is so very wrong, my friends. Okay. So let's start with Miriam was trained as a priestess, and they knew she was going to be the mother of a prophet of their time. Okay. And she lived in the temple, and she embodied Isis, and she was a vessel for that energy. Isis was the all-knowing female goddess at that time that they would worship, and she felt she was the goddess embodied. And when I say Mary, I mean like the Mary that we all know as Jesus's mother. Okay, her real name is Miriam. just so you know. Mary was, where do I have that written down here? Maybe I didn't write that down. But the term Mary was actually placed in front of their name because it actually meant like magical woman or priestess or woman connected to the divine. So that's why they actually placed that word, the name Mary, before their first name. And that's why we haven't really heard the word or the name Miriam before, because a lot of priestesses just went by Mary as their like formal title because they were priestesses. Okay. Mother Mary knew the art of sex magic. You would have never heard that in church, huh? She knew how to call a very specific soul into her womb. Now, when I learned specifically about this part, my mind was blown, because this is kind of how I conceived Luna. Without even realizing what I was doing, without really knowing that it was a form of magic. Let me explain. So, I was at a point in my life where I was meditating a lot more, and I was in therapy, and this was a really pivotal point in my life where I was really deconstructing for the first time after leaving the religion. It had been 10 years, and I was finally deciding to deal with my shit. And I was sitting inside of my sunroom, and I had this knowing inside my soul that today would be the day that I would get pregnant and that I could make it happen. And I went on YouTube, I Googled a pregnancy meditation, and I did the meditation. It was like an hour long. It was deep. It was intense. I was crying, and I finally knew in my soul that I was ready to be a mom. And this was huge because for my entire life, I had refused to become a mother. I didn't want it because I didn't want to carry the generational trauma from my past and expose my future child to the crap that I had put up with my whole life. So that moment was pivotal. And it was the first time that I really felt like this magic, this power. And note, it was under a full moon as well, which is very important to note. So I did the meditation, and then a few hours later, Jen got home from work. We did the dang thing, and literally within a couple of days, I knew that I was pregnant. Like, your body changes, you can feel something is different, and I felt it, and I was like, that meditation did it. I'm fucking magic. So when I learned that Mother Mary had the art of sex magic, I was like, whoa, I fucking did that too. So it's crazy. Okay. Okay. So after Jesus was born and all of the things, she actually took Jesus to the temple to be trained in the magic himself. So this is something that would have never also been spoken about, but they just made it seem like Jesus was just this thing that appeared and was placed on earth and with divine intervention or whatever, and not much explanation as to how he just knew his knowledge. It was just placed there in his brain because he was the quote-unquote son of God, right? So let's forget all of that BS. and actually realized that because he was the son of a priestess, he actually was born inside the temple, and he was literally exposed to all of this beautiful magic from birth, okay? So he was trained, and when he became of age, he began basically his like pilgrimage, or his rite of passage to become a actual priest, which was going out and actually speaking to people and helping them. Okay, so like that philanthropy and that like good-hearted attitude that like we know of Jesus is technically correct, but it's been twisted, right? So he went out, and he was, and this is very important. He actually met Mary Magdalene during his training at the temple. Now, Mary Magdalene, as we know, was just labeled as this woman that he ends up meeting one day, and she's a whore, and she washes Jesus's feet and asks for forgiveness for her sins or whatever. Like, what a classic display of patriarchy right there, twisting a beautiful, magical woman into a whore. It grinds my gears, okay? These two were equals, okay? They were both trained at the same time inside the temple. They were paired to go out and do their work in the world together, okay? So imagine it now, all the stories that you know of Jesus, like feeding the masses or like turning water into wine. Imagine now Mary Magdalene standing by his side and doing all of these things, okay? Doesn't it add just another complete different element to the story? Like, and how much of what we know is bullshit? It's so ridiculous, right? So then it says here, this was really, really something that struck me too, because it says here that Jesus's mother and the other priestesses actually founded their campaign, so their pilgrimage or whatever you want to call it, because they were the ones in charge of the wealth for so long. So in our society, you know, not so much now, but like let's think like 1800s, 1900s, okay? Like the time of our grandparents and great-grandparents. It was unheard of that women were in charge of any of the finances. A lot of them didn't have jobs. They were told that the only thing they were good for was being in the kitchen and popping out babies. And you weren't even allowed to open your own bank account until 1964, I believe. Absolutely ridiculous. That's like our parents' or our grandparents' time. And so like think of the oppression that has happened between this time, where I'm talking about how the priestesses and the women's were the center of the community, and they were the ones who controlled the money, who had the funds, who knew how to manage it and care for it and bring it to them as well. We are powerful. Women are powerful, and we can bring abundance to us. We were just so conditioned for years to think that we don't have the right to it, and it's still conditioned in your brain. It's time to uncondition yourself, okay? So when grounded, sacred women are stewards of wealth, incredible things happen on the planet. Think about that. Think about, you know, all the things that us women could be, you know, doing if we actually had seats of power over the world. How much better the world would be. It would be so incredible. We'd be thinking with our minds and our souls and our hearts instead of men thinking with their dicks. Okay. This is important to note here too. So the whole point of their campaign together, Jesus and Mary, was creating this equality between the two, and sharing the fact that like the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine are one and the same, and they should work together, right? And in their campaign, they met a lot of naysayers, a lot of people who were just like, no, women don't have a right to these things. They are nothing. And Jesus was supporting the sacred feminine, so he was hated for it. So that's actually why he was killed. He was killed for standing up for us. That's a huge thing to note, right? He was crucified for pushing the sacred feminine. And at the end, Mary Magdalene, okay, so we know by the story of when he's in the tomb, his mother goes in and anoints him with oils. That's false. It was Mary Magdalene who went in to anoint him with oils, because they were a pair, and she was his husband, essentially, her husband, and anointing him with oils so that he could resurrect with magic. Okay. Not just because he was the son of God. Derp derp. It's crazy how much this story was twisted. So so a lot of Christianity has twisted the essence of Jesus as well. Like, he is the way, the light, the truth. He is everything, but in reality, it's supposed to be an equal balance between the masculine and the feminine, right? So like, Jesus is supposed to be the light within you, and Mary is the body, right? So like, it's this beautiful combination of like magic within, body on the outside. Twisted. Okay. So then here is where the whole aspect of the story that really got twisted, and that they just took snippets and just threw it at the beginning, threw it at the end, and threw it in the middle, and then erased the rest of the crap. Okay, so listen to this. Mary Magdalene was raped, okay, and forced to marry John the Baptist. This is where he comes into it. She later divorced him because he was a POS, piece of shit, okay? So as a divorced woman, and quote-unquote dirty, she was shamed by all outside of the temples. But remember, at this time, the temples were eradicated, okay? So this is after the war. This is after Jesus was crucified. They destroyed all the temples. There was no sacred feminine allowed to be practiced anymore. This was the beginning of the erasure, okay? So when they forced Mary Magdalene, after she had been raped during all of this pillaging, she was forced to marry John the Baptist. And when she refused to stay with him any longer, she filed for divorce and fled. Okay, because she was portrayed as dirty, and she was so shamed, and she had to get out. I don't blame her. Can you imagine all of the shit she went through? Okay. She left after Jesus died and went to Avalon to live with the last remaining priestesses in their temple, okay? And there they shared all of their knowledge. She shared her experience from her temple days, and they shared their experience with her. And afterwards, she decided that, and then eventually that temple was destroyed as well, and she needed to flee yet again. So she actually ended up leaving and went to France. And there she wrote her story. It was lost for centuries, okay? And it randomly appeared in an Egyptian antique sale in 1942. Think about that. That's after world wars, and yet this piece of sacred text essentially was kept by someone. And then I guess the knowledge probably didn't get passed down to more protectors of the sacred text, and it just ended up falling into the hands of probably someone who didn't know what to do with it because it was just in their grandparents' attic or something, and it ended up in an antique sale, okay? A random antique sale. And thankfully, the person who found it realized that this was some insane, important stuff, okay? So, they published it, okay? And it was, I mean, this knowledge is actually, it's out there. You can research it yourself, and you can find all the information. It's out there, and it's common knowledge now. It's just, it's not widely known enough for most people to have access to it, which is just sad. Okay, so then in the year 400, Constantine, who was like the emperor or head of the fucking patriarchy at that time, he actually rewrote the books of the Bible and turned it into a really oppressive book. So he's the one who twisted and changed the words and changed the story and tweaked it so that the truth behind everything that I just said was wiped. Okay. So the word virgin actually means a woman unto herself, aka a priestess. But they twisted it and started painting her as a pious, pale blue woman who magically got pregnant by God, by divine birth, and then painted Mary Magdalene as a whore. So you see how things were twisted. Okay. There were really only two types of women that were placed inside the Bible, and this then carried forward for generations, right? There's the pious, quiet mother, or the whore, which, call her whatever you will, okay? So Constantine realized that women could actually heal through sex. So he successfully brainwashed people to believe that if you weren't this pious woman, then you worshipped the darkness and needed to die. Is everything clicking for you? Yeah, it's nuts. So then missionaries of the newfound Christian religion began their pilgrimages, okay? They began forcing their religions onto other countries, burning their temples to the ground with the pagans inside, all in the name of this so-called Christ, okay? They eradicated the people who worshipped the earth and the Great Mother. They replaced the Sacred Mother with the Mother Mary, which was their quote-unquote pious version of the true sacred feminine. Okay. And then things like Yule were eradicated and replaced with Christmas instead of celebrating winter solstice or the sun rising, or the son of God was born instead. So it used to be the sun. The sun was the sacred masculine and the moon was the sacred feminine, and together created this beautiful balance on earth and magic. And this is truly how everything should be, right? But they twisted it, and S-U-N became S-O-N, as in Son of God. So that's why Christmas happens near solstice, and all the pagan things like the Christmas tree is actually a replacement for the Yule log, which was the pagan celebration. So everything is just slightly tweaked and placed inside their own view, right? Let me see, what else? This one hurt. This one hurt. They actually built their churches on top of the destroyed sacred feminine temple sites. That's really painful. I wrote here how I was feeling after I read that part, and I'll share. I said, I'm crying right now because the pain of the ancestors is real. Their energy still lingers in the earth beneath these sacred places even today, and that is why we feel so moved stepping into these churches, right? So you go into places like Notre Dame in Paris. That was the site of a sacred feminine temple. So you feel moved, you feel all this beautiful energy because it's this gorgeous space, but really it's just tainted because there's this Catholic shit sitting right on top of it, and it's a site of murder, and it's a site of destruction. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so then another really important thing to address is like the burning times. So this only really started later on. I mean, yes, they burned everyone inside of the temples, but like the separate witch trials and such were only done later on. So it began with things like people realizing that their doctors really weren't doing much for them in that time, you know, like, and they were starting to sneak out to the outskirts of town where the witches, quote unquote, were living to get medicine or healing from them. And because they were realizing that their business was starting to go down, you know, the doctors were freaking out, and they were like, we need to get rid of these women because they're destroying our business, they're destroying our reputation as doctors, we need to get them out of here. So they started labeling them as witches, hauling them into the town squares, berating them in witch trials, and then burning them at the stake. Painful. Many of the fleeing women ended up in the Americas, and then the Salem witch trials happened. So a lot of this stuff was happening in Europe, in the Middle East, right? But then when they fled and they came to America for a new life, they ended up getting caught in that too because of the Puritan religion that was really, really at its peak during that time. And they believed that period blood was evil, even though that's the most sacred thing that a female has. Like, her uterus is her sacred magic, right? And any provocative movements or attire was banned in the Puritan religion. Like, cover all of your skin mindset came about, which I know very well from the religion I was born in too. And the genocide of the Native Americans also began because they started realizing that they also used magic, and that was a no-no. They needed to get rid of that because the Christian religion needed to be at the center, always. They, by the end, only, at the start, there were about 2 to 3 million indigenous people in the Americas, and by the end, there was only around 200,000. They eradicated so many people just because they wouldn't abide by their Christian religion. It's fucking awful. And then there was the slave trade. And they were using, again, the same friggin' book that tells them it's okay to enslave people, written by Constantine years ago, you know, saying that if they're not following your religion, then they are basically trash, so you may as well just take them, right? Terrible. Oh, and this is like, listen to this correlation, right? So they went from Europe, they fled to the Americas, the Salem witch trials, and guess where the first slave ship that was ever created to go be a slave ship left from? Boston, Massachusetts. Salem is also in Massachusetts, just so you know. Americans. I'm sorry if you're American and you hear this. Oh. And then Lincoln, President Lincoln, he was known for abolishing slavery, but literally like a few weeks beforehand, he had so much indigenous blood on his hands, but that's never talked about because he's the one who allowed that murdering of all these indigenous people. Yeah. And then we get into more modern times. How do you feel after me sharing all of that? If there was something in you that was like light bulb moments throughout this, it's normal. And it's because our DNA, our blood remembers, you know? All of this stuff is carried down through lineages of ancestry, and it's our blood has memory. And our DNA has that memory, and it's locked in there. And there's a reason why there's so much generational trauma crap that has been just like so deeply ingrained in us. And that's why so many of us now of this generation are able to actually like realize it, because our generation is going through an awakening. We're realizing that this way of life, this way of thinking is not correct. The way that we were raised inside of these oppressive religions is not how we should be living, and we should have freedom in so many different aspects, and including what we believe. Now, do I all of a sudden switch religions and all of a sudden become a follower of all of this stuff? Not necessarily. And that's what's amazing about free will, is that you can choose what it is you actually truly believe inside of your soul and just go with it. No one has to know. You don't have to plaster it on everything, but it's sharing that information, making it available for everyone to learn on their own and choose. Choosing is the most important part, because the religions we were raised with didn't allow us to choose. The patriarchy forced this controlling mindset into everyone, that women were just below men and that we had to follow and do and be everything that they wanted us to be. And it's time for us to step fully into our power and just be who we want to be. So I think I'm going to end part 1 of this here. I don't know where this little series is going to go, but I think, you know, this is really important information that needs to start being shared, and women need to stop living in fear. And if you are someone who has been living in fear, I'm here to if you want to reach out, if you want to chat, if you want to discuss any of this kind of thing, if you feel like you've been wanting to fully step into your power in every aspect of your life, have that autonomy, that freedom, may it be simply being able to get out a couple of times a week outside of your house instead of just being a mom. You know, you're needed for more things than just washing dishes and taking care of your kids. Although those are very important things, you should be having passions of your own. You should be wanting to make money of your own. If you really think deep down, what is your passion and what could you be doing to work towards that? Have you even been allowing yourself to think those thoughts recently? And if not, it's time to unlock those parts of your brain and allow yourself to feel those things, because no one should be controlling you, and your autonomy is important. So I will see you in the next episode, and I really hope you enjoyed learning about all of this. If you could please leave some reviews on this podcast. I also have the video version on YouTube, if you'd like to hop on there, my channel is Healing with Mel, and please like, comment, and subscribe on there. That really helps me out. And check out my Instagram, Melissa Bourbonnais, and I'd love to connect with you on there. If you want to, if you want to reach out to me, that's the best place to do it, and we can definitely get to chatting. And I'm also an online business coach. I really help you step into your power financially as well. So if you need guidance in any way on stepping into the online space and having that autonomy to create your own income and time and health and wealth freedom inside of your family and your life, then I'd love to help you make that happen as well. So I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening.